and the one who played his wife. We're going to put them in a series of their.
When people think about the Andy Griffith Show, they usually remember laughter, simple life lessons, and the peaceful town of Mayberry. They remember Sheriff Andy Taylor giving calm advice on the front porch. They remember the warm presence of Aunt Bee in the kitchen. And most of all, they remember Deputy Barney Fife, nervous, talkative, and always trying a little too hard to prove himself. But behind that gentle comedy was a more complicated story. Before his death in 2006, Don Knotts spoke openly about why he left the show and why other cast members slowly stepped away. The reasons were not dramatic scandals or angry fights. They were quieter and more human. They involved money, contracts, misunderstandings, personal struggles, and the simple truth that success does not always mean fairness. For years, fans wondered why such a successful show lost key cast members at different times. The answer, according to Don, was not about hate or betrayal. It was about business decisions, career goals, and the pressure that comes when a small television show suddenly becomes a national treasure. When The Andy Griffith Show first aired on October 3, 1960, on CBS, no one expected it to become one of the most beloved programs in television history. Yet week after week, families gathered around their televisions to visit Mayberry. The show never dropped below 7th place in the ratings during its entire run, and by the time it ended in 1968, it was number 1. That kind of success was rare. The series created a world that felt safe and comforting during a decade filled with social change and uncertainty. Viewers connected with the town's simple values and familiar faces. At the center was Andy Griffith as Sheriff Andy Taylor, steady and thoughtful. But very quickly, another character began stealing scenes. Don Knotts' Deputy Barney Fife brought high energy and sharp timing to the show. His nervous confidence and exaggerated bravery made audiences laugh every week. Don poured everything into that role. His performance earned him multiple Emmy Awards and turned Barney into one of television's most unforgettable characters. Yet, even as the show grew stronger and more popular, important decisions were being made behind closed doors. Contracts were signed. Ownership rights were arranged. Salaries were negotiated. These early business choices would later shape the future of the cast in ways no one fully understood at the time. Don Knotts was not just an actor playing a funny deputy. He was a major reason the show worked. Many episodes depended heavily on Barney's mistakes, fears, and comic reactions. Writers leaned into his style because it brought big laughs. Over time, the show's balance shifted. Andy Griffith stepped back from being the main source of comedy and allowed Barney to carry much of that responsibility. This creative decision made the show better, but it also changed the business side of things. Andy Griffith had ownership in the series from the beginning, which meant he benefited greatly from its growing success. Don Knotts, however, was paid a regular salary with no ownership stake. At first, that seemed normal. But as the show became a hit, the difference between ownership and salary became more serious. Don did not complain publicly. He remained professional and loyal. Still, as the years passed, he began to realize that his financial situation did not reflect the importance of his role. At the same time, he had dreams beyond Mayberry. He wanted to try leading roles in movies. He wanted to see how far his talent could go. These feelings slowly built up during the first 5 seasons. What began as a simple sitcom had turned into a powerful television success, and with success came complicated realities. By the time season 5 approached, the friendly town of Mayberry was no longer just a fictional place. It was a valuable business. And that business would soon influence decisions that changed the show forever. To understand why Don Knotts eventually left The Andy Griffith Show, it helps to understand how important he had become to it. When the series first began, Andy Griffith was meant to be the clear center of the comedy. The show even grew out of an earlier appearance Griffith made on The Danny Thomas Show. In the early episodes of Mayberry, Andy Taylor had more of the funny lines, while Barney Fife was written as a side character. But something changed almost immediately. As soon as Don Knotts stepped fully into the role, it became clear that his style of comedy was special. He had a natural gift for physical humor, nervous gestures, and fast-talking panic. Audiences responded strongly to him. Even Andy Griffith later admitted that he realized early on the show worked better if he played the calm, steady straight man while Don handled most of the big laughs. That creative shift helped the show grow stronger. Barney Fife became the engine of the comedy. His exaggerated confidence, mixed with deep insecurity, created endless story possibilities. He bragged about his skills with firearms, yet only carried one bullet in his pocket. He talked about bravery, yet panicked at small problems. Viewers loved this contradiction because it felt funny and human at the same time. Don Knotts carefully built this character from small details. The quick blinks, the shaky voice, the sudden bursts of energy. All of it was carefully shaped by his instincts. The more the writers leaned into his performance, the more central Barney became. Awards followed. Don won multiple Emmy Awards for his role, confirming what audiences already knew. He was not just a supporting actor. He was one of the main reasons people tuned in every week. Yet behind this creative success was a growing business reality. At the start of the show, Andy Griffith's manager had secured him partial ownership of the series. That meant Andy earned not only his salary, but also a share of the show's profits. Don Knotts, like most actors, signed a standard contract for weekly pay. At the time, this seemed normal. No one knew the show would become such a massive hit. But as ratings remained high year after year, the financial difference between ownership and salary became very clear. Don was earning about $1,250 per episode, which added up to around $35,000 per year. That was a respectable amount in the early 1960s, but it was small compared to the money the show generated overall. Don began to feel that his contribution deserved greater reward. At the same time, he was thinking about his future. He had already appeared in films like The Incredible Mr. Limpet, and Hollywood studios were showing interest in him as a leading man. Another important factor was a misunderstanding about the show's future. Don believed the series would end after its 5th season. He had been told that Andy Griffith was ready to move on, and this information influenced his decision. If the show was ending anyway, it made sense for Don to sign a movie contract with Universal Studios. However, later Andy changed his mind and decided to continue the show for more seasons. By that time, Don had already signed his film contract. He felt it would be wrong to break that agreement. In later interviews, Don explained that he did not leave because he hated the show or because of a dramatic fight. He left because of business decisions, timing, and the simple desire to grow professionally. Still, the situation left some sadness behind. Barney Fife had become a beloved character, and his departure changed the show's chemistry. The decision may have seemed practical on paper, but emotionally, it marked the beginning of a new chapter for everyone involved. When Don Knotts left the Andy Griffith Show after the 5th season, viewers felt the change immediately. Barney Fife had not just been another character. He had been the main source of energy and surprise in many episodes. Without him, the tone of the show shifted. The writers and producers understood that they had lost something important, and they quickly tried to find a replacement. A new deputy named Warren Ferguson, played by Jack Burns, was introduced. On paper, Warren seemed like a good idea. He was educated, trained at the police academy, and eager to serve in Mayberry. But the character did not connect with audiences. The problem was not that Jack Burns lacked talent. The problem was that the show's rhythm had been built around Barney's unique personality. Warren's style was different, and viewers could feel the difference. The chemistry between the characters was no longer the same. Within a short time, it became clear that Warren was not working. After only a handful of episodes, the character quietly disappeared. The show continued for 3 more seasons, and while it remained popular, many fans felt that something special had been lost. Don Knotts would occasionally return for guest appearances, and each time he did, audiences were reminded of what had made the earlier seasons so memorable. But his role was never again full time. As the years passed, Don spoke more openly about the deeper reasons behind his departure. He explained that money had played a bigger role than many people realized. While he always spoke respectfully about Andy Griffith, he admitted that the financial arrangement had been uneven from the beginning. Andy's ownership stake meant that he benefited from reruns, syndication, and the overall success of the show. Don, however, received only his weekly salary. Over time, he began to feel that his work had added enormous value to the series. He did not resent Andy personally, but he did regret that his own contract had not protected him better. His manager later admitted that the deal they negotiated for Dawn had been poor. It had seemed fair at first, but once the show became a hit, its limitations became clear. Dawn even attempted to renegotiate his contract near the end of the 5th season. According to reports, he asked for a small ownership percentage or a better financial arrangement. Unfortunately, the discussion did not go smoothly. There was confusion about what he was asking for, and the moment passed without agreement. Dawn later suggested that this misunderstanding was one of the key turning points. Had that conversation gone differently, he might have stayed. Other cast members also faced their own struggles. Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, often felt underappreciated. She had a strong background in theater and took her craft seriously. But she sometimes felt that the show focused more on Andy and Dawn's comedy, leaving her character with fewer meaningful moments. Behind the scenes, she reportedly had a tense relationship with Andy Griffith. Over time, she grew frustrated with the environment on set. Though she remained with the show until its final season, she later admitted that the experience had not always been joyful. Eleanor Donahue, who played Ellie Walker in the early seasons, also left because she felt her role was shrinking. As Barney became more central, some other characters naturally received less attention. Don himself later acknowledged that the show sometimes struggled to create strong storylines for its female characters. In the end, when Don reflected on why people left the Andy Griffith Show, he did not describe dramatic feuds or shocking betrayals. Instead, he described something more ordinary but equally powerful. People left because of career goals, financial realities, creative changes, and personal feelings. Success can bring happiness, but it can also create pressure. Contracts signed early in a show's life can later feel unfair. Misunderstandings can grow if they are not carefully addressed. Don Knotts' departure was not an act of anger. It was a decision shaped by timing, ambition, and the business side of television. Before his death in 2006, he made it clear that he never stopped loving Mayberry or the people he worked with. But he also understood that even the warmest chapters of life eventually close. When people think about classic television, one of the first shows that comes to mind is The Andy Griffith Show. The series first aired in 1960 and quickly became one of the most loved programs in America. It told simple stories about life in the small town of Mayberry. The town was peaceful, friendly, and full of interesting characters. At the center of it all was Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith. By his side was his nervous but loyal deputy, Barney Fife, played by Don Knotts. Their friendship and chemistry were a big reason the show became so popular. Over the years, however, fans began to notice that some familiar faces were no longer appearing on the show. Characters left. Some storylines changed. The feeling of the show slowly shifted. For many viewers, this was confusing and even disappointing. Why would such a successful cast begin to leave a hit series? For a long time, there were rumors. Some people believed there were arguments behind the scenes. Others thought it was about money. Before his death in 2006, Don Knotts spoke openly about those years. He shared details about contracts, fears, career decisions, and misunderstandings that shaped the future of the show. One of the most talked about departures was Don Knotts himself. Barney Fife was not just a side character. He was, in many ways, the heart of the comedy. His nervous behavior, overconfidence, and constant need to prove himself made audiences laugh every week. Knotts won 5 Emmy Awards for his role. His performance brought energy and excitement to every episode. So when he left after the 5th season, many fans were shocked. The truth, as Knotts later explained, was not about anger or drama. It was about uncertainty. At the time, television contracts were very different from today. Actors often signed for a limited number of seasons. Knotts believed that the show would end after 5 years. He had been told that Andy Griffith was thinking about moving on to other projects. Because of this, Knotts accepted an offer from Universal Studios to star in his own films. It seemed like a safe choice. He thought the series was finishing anyway. But then something unexpected happened. The network decided to continue the show. This created a difficult situation. Knotts had already signed his new contract. He could not easily return as a regular cast member. There was no fight or betrayal. It was simply a business decision made during a time of confusion. Andy Griffith himself later said he regretted not making the situation clearer to Knotts. Their friendship remained strong, but the show was never quite the same without Barney as a full-time character. Another major change involved Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee. Aunt Bee was like the heart of the Taylor household. She represented warmth, tradition, and family values. While she stayed on the show for its entire run, her relationship with Andy Griffith off-screen was said to be complicated. Reports over the years suggested that Bavier sometimes felt isolated on set. She was older than many of the cast members and preferred a quieter lifestyle. While this did not lead to her leaving the show early, it did affect the mood behind the scenes. There were also smaller but important departures. Jim Nabors, who played Gomer Pyle, became so popular that he was given his own spin-off series, Gomer Pyle, USMC. This was actually a positive change. Nabors' character was loved by fans, and the spin-off became successful in its own right. But his departure meant that Mayberry slowly lost another familiar face. As the seasons continued, Andy Griffith himself began to feel tired of playing Sheriff Taylor. He was proud of the show but did not want to be trapped in one role forever. By the 8th season, he had decided it was time to move on. The final season of the show even changed its name to Mayberry RFD, and Andy appeared less often. This marked the true end of the original magic that had defined the series. Looking back, the real reasons cast members left were not dramatic scandals or secret feuds. They were normal human reasons: career growth, contract misunderstandings, personal goals, changes in television business practices. Don Knotts made it clear before his passing that he loved the show and the people he worked with. He never spoke with bitterness. Instead, he reflected on those years with gratitude. In many ways, the story of the cast leaving shows how fragile television success can be. Even a program as beloved as The Andy Griffith Show could not escape change. But perhaps that is what makes it even more special. The episodes that were made still exist. The laughter, the simple life lessons, and the warm feeling of Mayberry remain unchanged. Today, decades later, new generations continue to discover the show. They laugh at Barney's mistakes. They admire Andy's calm wisdom. And they understand that behind every great television moment are real people making real decisions about their lives. The truth behind the departures is not shocking or dark. It is simply a reminder that even in the world of classic TV, life moves forward. As the show moved into its later seasons, the feeling of Mayberry slowly began to change. In the early black-and-white years of The Andy Griffith Show, the focus was simple. Stories centered on friendship, family, and small-town lessons. Much of the humor came from the close relationship between Sheriff Andy Taylor and his excitable deputy, Barney Fife. When Don Knotts stepped away as a regular cast member, that balance shifted. Even though he returned for a few guest appearances later on, the weekly spark that fans loved was missing. Viewers could feel the difference, even if they did not know the business reasons behind it. Don Knotts later explained that leaving was one of the hardest decisions of his career. At the time, he believed he was making the smart move. Television in the 1960s was changing quickly. Actors did not always have long-term security. When he was offered a film contract with Universal, it promised stability and new opportunities. He thought the series would end after 5 seasons, especially because Andy Griffith had mentioned possibly wanting to move on. Knotts trusted that information. He never imagined the network would decide to continue without him as a regular. When the show did continue, it created a strange situation. Andy Griffith remained the star, but the tone of the series softened. The comedy became calmer and more focused on gentle storytelling. Some fans appreciated this quieter style. Others missed the fast-paced humor that Barney brought. Behind the scenes, there was no big fight. In fact, Knotts and Griffith stayed close friends for the rest of their lives. They often spoke kindly about each other in interviews. This shows that sometimes public rumors do not match private reality. Another important change was the growing popularity of supporting characters. Jim Nabors, who played Gomer Pyle, became a fan favorite almost by accident. His simple personality and kind heart made him stand out. Because audiences loved him so much, He was given his own series, Gomer Pyle, USMC. From a business point of view, this was a success. It allowed the network to expand the Mayberry world. But creatively, it meant that another familiar face was gone from the original setting. Each departure slowly reshaped the town that viewers had grown attached to. There were also changes in the way television was produced. In 1965, the show moved from black and white to color. This may seem like a small technical detail, but it had a big impact on how the series felt. The earlier seasons had a cozy, simple look. The black and white photography gave Mayberry a timeless quality. When color episodes began, everything appeared brighter and more modern. Some fans enjoyed the update. Others felt it took away from the original charm. These shifts added to the sense that the show was entering a new chapter. By the late 1960s, Andy Griffith himself was thinking seriously about the future. Playing Sheriff Taylor had made him famous, but it also limited him. Actors often worry about being typecast, which means being known for only one role. Griffith did not want that to define the rest of his career. Even though the show was still successful in ratings, he felt ready for something different. This decision was not about money or anger. It was about growth. Many performers eventually reach a point where they want new challenges. Before his death, Don Knotts reflected on these years with honesty. He admitted that he sometimes wondered what might have happened if he had stayed. Would the show have continued even longer? Would the tone have remained more comedic? But he also accepted that life does not offer clear answers. He was proud of the work he did on The Andy Griffith Show. He understood that Barney Fife had become a lasting character in television history. The final season marked the true end of the original story. After Griffith left, the show was renamed Mayberry RFD, focusing on other characters. Without its central figure, however, it never reached the same level of cultural impact. It eventually ended, closing a chapter in television history. Looking back, the reasons cast members left were not secret scandals or dramatic betrayals. They were simple human decisions shaped by contracts, career dreams, and the natural passage of time. Don Knotts confirmed that there was no hidden feud driving his exit. Instead, there was misunderstanding and uncertainty about the future of the series. That truth may not be as shocking as rumors suggest, but it is more real. In the end, what matters most is the legacy left behind. The laughter, the life lessons, and the warm spirit of Mayberry continue to live on through reruns and streaming. Even though cast members moved on, their performances remain. The story behind their departures reminds us that behind every beloved show are real people making choices about their lives and careers. Even years after the final episode aired, interest in what really happened behind the scenes of The Andy Griffith Show has never truly faded. Fans continue to watch reruns, share favorite scenes, and ask the same question: why did such a perfect cast slowly drift apart? The answer, as time has shown, is much more human than dramatic. There were no shocking betrayals or secret scandals. Instead, there were personal goals, changing contracts, and the simple reality that nothing lasts forever. Before his passing in 2006, Don Knotts